I was born in Baltimore. If anyone knows anything about Baltimore, it is not a terrific place everywhere, right? Like there's a lot of crime. It's a very violent place, and that's where I originally grew up. Like until I was like 8, and there was a lot of problems in my neighborhood. Like I grew up kind of in a rough area where I got in fights. I got picked on a lot, and actually something that has affected me my entire life that I'm dealing with now, which I didn't even know about because I'm sure we'll get to it. But I'm actually in graduate school now for like mental health and counseling and
Wow.
therapy to not only deal with my own stuff, but to help others that wouldn't normally go to. I don't I don't have like a sweater vest on. I don't look like a normal counselor. I don't sound like a normal counselor. So there's a lot of people who might be willing to speak to me that wouldn't necessarily go to a normal situation. So that's what I'm trying to. I'm trying to fill that need. But the reason why I mention that is because when I was young, like 5, 6 years old, we had a neighbor who was abusive to his wife and stuff, and tried breaking into our house. Like there was a violent home invasion when myself and my sisters were home alone, and we had to like run away. So like there were things like this in my past that immediately drew me to never being a victim, right? Like not only because of the circumstance, but I also
Mm.
wanted to put on muscles because like I was too little to fight some grown man trying to come in and hurt us. I was too, you know what I mean? Like, so my
Yeah.
whole life has been about training martial arts, like I said, or trying to be strong, or trying to be tough, or putting on this armor and stuff. And I've had very, very blue collar, hardworking parents who have encouraged me to always keep driving forward and always work harder than everyone else and try to like just outdo things. So it really set up a perfect framework for exactly to become the guy that like by the time that you saw it, I was in my 30s, just had been practicing this my whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolute machine, man. Absolute machine.
and it really it I do have to say that the way that I grew up doing construction with my dad and manual labor all the time, and had a lot of energy as a kid. Still have a lot. I'm 44 and still have a lot of energy. And my dad was the classic dad who's like, "Hey, dig a hole and then fill it in with like just dig another hole and then fill it in." And like it was it was always just keeping me busy with like splitting wood, doing manual labor, doing something construction wise,
Yeah.
trying to use up that energy and stuff. And he's always been an inspiration. My mom has been a hard worker her whole life. She's an inspiration to me too. So it's been it's actually been very, very interesting. And um that led me up like I said through all lifting and stuff like that. And then after I went to college, but for criminal justice and sociology. It didn't have anything to do with lifting weights and stuff. And
Hmm.
but that was always a big passion of mine. So when I got out of college, I knew that I wanted to do something with it and got involved with gyms and stuff like that. And then, like I said, because of my background, because of my work ethic, a couple situations, I got involved in counterterrorism with the government and kind of was all over the place for about 10 years of my life, just traveling a lot and doing different things. It's not as cool as it sounds, but and I don't talk a ton about it. But
But it's
the reason
tiring,
why I
man.
mentioned that, um, the reason why I mentioned that is because some point in those travels, I was someplace and contracted a parasite called schistomiasis, which is the second most deadly parasite to malaria. Schistomiasis kills like 240,000 people in Africa alone every single year, but it's not seen a lot in America.
Crazy.
So I'm running Never
Yeah.
State, which is my gym for those who don't know, and we're having all this success, and we have world champions, and all these great things are going on. And one day, I go in and I start feeling sick, and I'm like, I'm gonna throw up, and I'm not a person who threw up very regularly at the time. And sure enough,
Mm.
I got sick, and that started it. And it started out happening like once a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, and it just kept increasing, increasing, increasing. And then I started just dropping body weight. Obviously, I wasn't able to hold on to mass. If I put food in,
Yeah.
it came
Of
right back
course, man.
out.
Yeah.
Like it was terrible, and it got to the point where I was throwing up. And I say throwing up, but dry heaving. I'm sorry for being graphic, but um, 30
No,
to
not at all,
50
man.
times a day, I would have episodes, right, where something was happening, and
Yeah.
had lost 70 pounds of body weight and
That's
was
crazy,
just,
man.
it was
That's
bad.
crazy.
I tore my other rotator cuff, was having injuries because I couldn't hold on to nutrients, but still wanted to train. It's all documented
Yeah.
on YouTube. You can just see the decline, and even my
Mate, I
voice.
know. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about it. Sorry, Brian, to cut you
No,
off.
no.
Just because obviously I was following you like through this. So when I started
Yeah.
following you, I don't know if you would consider it the peak of your sort of like physicality, if you want to call it. But I mean, it seemed like it to me. I mean, you were just deadlifting, squatting, benching, overhead pressing, like insane freaking numbers, and you were like freaking jacked. But like doing burpees and freaking like sprints and everything in between your sets. And I was like, man, this guy is like, he's like freaking Terminator or something. But then,
Right.
yeah, obviously your story then started slowly unfolding with all of this like sickness. And I remember it was like, because obviously you know what it is now, but there was a long time and you didn't know what it was, did you? And you were like, and I remember in one of your videos, before I let you continue, I remember you saying like, it was crazy because you were going to all of these doctors and they were saying like, we don't understand. You are like the fittest guy we've ever seen in our lives. But at the same time, like you are dying and we do not know why. And that is crazy. I bet that was
I
so
was
crazy to go
actually
through.
when I went in for this shoulder, because of that, I was at the national championships and tore my rotator cuff, and was at surgery for it. And literally, I'm in there, my pre-surgery stuff, explaining this vomiting issue and why like they need to be careful, because if I'm asleep, I'm going to be throwing up. Like that's how I wake up every day is vomiting in my mouth, right? Like so, just warning these people, and they're like, you literally are the healthiest dying person we know. Like, your shoulder doesn't matter. We need to get this figured out. And I had dropped a lot of body weight and was trying to get better and stuff. And went to the Arnold Sports Festival with Miles, actually. That was when myself, Miles, and Nick were all there. And I ran into a guy named Mark Bell. A lot of people watching probably know who Mark Bell is. And
Yeah.
he's a friend of mine who we've done some collaborations and stuff. And I run into him and he's like, hey, man, I thought you were like dead. Like,
Very famous powerlifter, isn't he?
very famous and great coach and great guy. And so he literally runs into me. He's like, hey, man, I thought you were dead. Like, what's going on with you? And I explained what's going on.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have a friend who's a doctor who only sees like people who do dangerous stuff overseas. And she will, as a friend, she will take a look at you and see what's going on. And so I had been sick for probably 3 or 4 years where I'm just vomiting constantly. I won't leave the house sometimes because I'm too ashamed. Like I'll be in the middle of the grocery store and just, you know what I mean? Like I'd be in the middle of a conversation or I'd be driving and just,
Man.
it was terrible, right? And not to mention the fact that like
And let's
mentally,
face it as
what
well, if
that
you're a
does
proud
to you,
man, you know.
it was
Yeah.
like having the flu for years, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Sounds worse, man, to be honest. Like,
it was terrible. It was terrible. And like I got to a dark place. You know what I mean? Like when you don't see any signs of getting better and literally doctors are like, you're gonna die. Like and this is gonna be the rest of your life. It's just constant vomiting. You're like,
yeah.
you know.
Man,
Anyway.
it's insanely heavy, isn't it? I don't know if any human being could have handled it better than you did, to be honest, man. I think a lot of people just wouldn't have even come out of that the other end. You know, it's like crazy. The amount of toll that must have had on your psyche.
Yeah,
Especially as someone that just before that was used to being like superhuman, you know?
Yes.
So one extreme to the other, like what an insane turnaround.
And it was like everything that I built, right? Like even like my body, like I'd been working at making my body as great of a weapon as I possibly could since I was a child, right? Because of that incident. And then literally just watching it waste away. And then as that goes, like the gym, I'm like, I've got this awesome thing going and now I'm going to lose everything. Like it was really hard. It was hard on me. It was hard on my wife. It was hard on my family. Anyway, we ended up having to drive to New York City, which is it's a decent drive from where I live into the middle of the most like congested place possible, and met someone named Dr. Lyon, who now is like social media famous. If you don't know who she is, her name is Gabriel Lyon, and she is just an outstanding doctor. And she
Pretty epic name.
yes, yeah, and absolutely incredible, right? So I sit down across from her, and her husband's a Navy SEAL. Like she deals a lot with the Navy SEAL Foundation and stuff like that. And she tells me to stick out my tongue, and so I stick out my tongue, and she goes, you have worms. And I was like, so that's my problem is I have worms,
man.
right? But it's literally a simple fix because she recognized it immediately from like seeing other people who've had this before. But in Africa, like you go into like a med shed and somebody's like, hey, you have this problem, take these pills, you're gonna be better, right? But because I had it for so
Yeah.
long, they had done their damage and everything in my body. So I still deal with the vomiting. I only do it usually maybe once a
Still to
day,
this day.
2 times a day, but it's exponentially better than it was. But from that moment forward, I started kind of making progress back. You know what I mean? But I've never been able to. Been fighting age as well as I've gone, but I've never been able to get back to where I was.
Man, I'm just as somebody that's like looked up to you and been following you for a while, and just like such a decent guy, I'm so glad, man, that you actually, came out the other end of that. And isn't it crazy that like all of those years where you were going, and I remember in one of your videos you were saying, they were testing you for like every cancer under the sun and all this like different stuff, and you didn't know, and you must have felt so hopeless, just being like, man, why the hell am I dying?
Yeah.
But then suddenly for Mark Bell, just to put you in contact with that person that then immediately just went, I know what's wrong with you. Here, take these pills. Like that must have been like, what was that like for you? That must have been insane. Like,
It
do you
was
remember sitting there
insane.
and just being like, oh my God, I finally figured it out?
It was almost unbelievable. Like, because you were like, there's no way
Yeah.
it's this simple. Like, we've been to 30 doctors who've
Yeah.
given us 30 different ideas, none of which panned out. Um, so
Yeah.
we actually had to get some pretty heavy testing that had to do with probing and things like that because of testing for the worms. And the whole there's a video on my channel where
That's
I
a word
tell
you never want to hear.
no you and we're talking like when this is happening, right? I'm obviously not looking at the doctor because that would have been really weird. And the doctor, he's telling me he's doing this and it's very uncomfortable. I'm not in a good place. And the doctor's like, you'd never believe this was 10 inches long, would you? And I was like, what? Like, I could not believe that was going on. And I had to get it done twice just to make sure I didn't like it. But they did have to do it twice to make sure that I
man.
didn't have the worms. So, and it was so funny, like, because the first
Man,
time,
that's
like,
crazy.
like I went to the doctor and she's like, hey, you have these worms. We need to test to make sure what kind of worms you have because there were a couple different parasites I had. And she, as soon as that 10-inch comment came out, I literally thought about Mark Bell and was like, he set me up. There's no way this is not a setup. Like, this is just a big elaborate joke. And anyway, but yeah, man, it was otherworldly to be able to take some pills and immediately like just the vomiting started decreasing because anyone who's been sick with like food poisoning where like you vomit multiple times a day and you're never comfortable and like, man, every single day I would go to sleep, right? Because I don't sleep much anyway because of the incident as a child. But like I would go to sleep and then get woken up literally by having vomit in my mouth. That's how I'd like be choking and have to deal with it.
No.
And I mean,
Brutal.
that to go from that to where I am now is just, it's night and day. You know what I mean? It's absolutely night and day.
When you were at your worst, when it was at its darkest, did you just think like, this is it for me? Did you have one of those moments?
I had those moments all the time. Like, because you're not only terrified that like,
Yeah.
you have to have something terrible if this is happening to your body, right? Like there's no way that like
Yeah.
something good is going on. And I mean mentally it just got exhausting. Like I didn't want to play anymore. You know what I mean? I was like, if these are the cards that I got dealt, I don't want to play anymore, you know? And it's so there were definitely times and that, man, I've been through many things in my life, like I've said. And I will say that this is the darkest that it ever got for me just because it felt so hopeless and there was just it felt like no one had any idea what was happening. I was getting worse by the day. It just, it got dark. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the mental health stuff now in grad school is because there's other people going through chronic illness. Like I've been through chronic illness. I've been through like violent home invasion as a child, like trauma, like these things, like my past and counterterrorism, all those things are things where I
Yeah.
believe that I can relate to individuals that are definitely in need of mental help. And
Yeah.
if I can be there for somebody in that dark time and be like, I don't know what is going on with you because I'm not in your shoes, right? Like, it's really tough to ever be like, yeah, I
Yeah.
understand, because you don't, right? Like, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I can be like, look, I've been through some dark times and I've been through some stuff. And if I'm able to
Yeah.
even just provide that, if I would have, because I mean, I didn't even think that that incident as a kid was a big deal. I was like, oh, that stuff just happens to people. It's not a big deal. And I have so many incidences throughout my life that are like that, that I was like, until I went and got some help for myself, like some therapy for myself, because
Mm.
of being so sick and things like that, I didn't even realize any of that was a big deal. And it played a role. And it's one
Yeah.
of the reasons why I have all the muscles and have always been training like that my whole life. Like, there's just
It's
direct
set up
line.
the framework for your whole entire life. Like, clearly,
Yes.
it's clear to me that it's set up the framework for your whole entire life. And I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, like a lot of things in life, it's like a two-sided coin. There's so many. I mean, for you, I bet it's a lot of inner turmoil, a lot of struggle. But one of the beautiful things that's come out of that is you are clearly have this thing inside of you that just wants to help people, whether it's in the gym or with this therapy stuff. You have this like need inside of you to like help people just get better, whether it's like people that are struggling mentally or get better physically so that you can live a better life and live longer, and that's a beautiful thing, man.